11 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Joanne, can you do roll call?
Councilmembers Erickson,
Here.
Larson,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Valento,
Here.
Mayor Roberts.
Here. And if you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Council, we have an agenda in front of us. Is there anyone interested in making a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Also move.
I'll second.
Second, we have first and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Next item, open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the council with any city-related business. We ask that you limit it to 3 minutes and come up and state your name and your address for the record. So it doesn't look like there's anyone that signed up or interested in speaking. All right. Okay, so the consent agenda. Looking for a motion to approve consent agenda 6A through M, actually through Q. The motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Our first regular agenda item is an annual update from the Lakes area, or Lake Center for Youth and Families, and we're going to introduce or welcome Dr. Linda Matson.
Well, thank you. I hope the rest of your meeting goes as quickly. So Mayor Roberts and members of the council and staff, thank you for allowing me to give a brief presentation this evening. I am Linda Matson and currently serving as the Community Outreach Coordinator for Lake Center for Youth and Families. Prior to that, I was the Executive Director for 5 years, and prior to that, I worked in the Forest Lake School District for 36 years, with my last 8 years as Superintendent. Well, as many of you know, Lake Center was started in 1976 by then Forest Lake Police Chief Jim Trudeau, who later was the Washington County Sheriff. And he believed that youth that found themselves in trouble with minor offenses really needed the opportunity to reflect on their actions along with their parents or guardians and take appropriate actions, which could be an apology letter, restitution, taking a class, etc. And he viewed those minor infractions that youth find themselves in, and probably all of us at one point probably found ourselves in, is that instead of ignoring it or sending them to the county attorney and getting them into the court system, there needed to be some middle ground. And that has held true since 1976. So as time went on, intervention has stayed, and we have developed other programming to serve youth and families that's been very varied over those many years, but intervention has stayed. We have 3 areas of programming at Lake Center currently, and enrichment programming, intervention, and counseling. Enrichment programming has included Youth First, which is an after-school program for students in grades 4 through 6 in Chisago County. It's free of charge, or was free of charge for students. We ran it for 8 years, taking it over from a nonprofit that folded. And we have had grant funding for those 8 years, but unfortunately for this year, it was not continued, which is very common, and 8 years is a long time to have continue with a grant. But during last year, we had 120 participants and 596 sessions of that programming. Safety Camp has been going on for a long time in Forest Lake, and it's for youth entering grades 3 through 5. It's held in the summer for 1 to 2 days. First aid, bike safety, and other presentations around safety are the focus of the program. It's planned and delivered by Lake Center staff, and then also the Forest Lake Police and Fire Departments, and then community leaders as well. Intervention, as I mentioned, has been with us for a long time, and we have had contracts with Chisago and Washington counties to provide the intervention services that I mentioned. Not much has changed in a real general sense from 1976 to the present in terms of assisting youth to help them develop healthy decision-making skills and interrupt those harmful behavior patterns. Overall, 189 clients were served in the intervention program with 258 sessions. The three main referral sources are Chisago and Washington counties and the Forest Lake Police Department. Washington County had 56 clients last year, and 48 of those clients were from Forest Lake. Also in intervention is a program at Linwood Elementary. We have a full-time staff member there, and she works, and Linwood Elementary is in the northern part of the Forest Lake School District. And she works with individual students, small groups, and classrooms of students. And the focus of the work is really to identify potential areas of concern before they become a concern. So we look at that instead of intervention, it's more a prevention program. And we've, last year, over 400 students, and that is a duplicated count, so they may have been in a couple of different programs, participated in that program. This has also been funded through a state grant for 6 years and was renewed for 2 more years in 2024 for twice as much as the previous year. Again, which hardly ever happens in the grant world, so we're thrilled that that has happened. And then we have a brand new program, and you have a handout on that, that would fall under intervention, and it's the Education Engagement Program. It provides support for students in Chisago Lakes, North Branch, and Rush City school districts. We have 2 full-time staff members that were hired, and the funding comes from the St. Croix River Education District and the Chisago County Human Services District. And it's to get kids, if they have absentee issues or tardy issues, et cetera, to really look into why is that. Is it about transportation? Is it about, it could be lack of food or lack of adequate clothing, et cetera. So why is it they're not coming to school, and then working to solve those issues? And then counseling is our third program area. We serve young children through adults. Our youngest client is 3, and our oldest clients are in their 70s and 80s. And we serve them virtually. Also in our office and in the Forest Lake School District and at Lakes International Language Academy. We have an interagency agreement, which we've had for many years with the Forest Lake School District. So therapists come in, students come out of their classroom, they have their 50-minute session, and then they go back. And that eliminates a lot of barriers for families and for students. When you look at the client counts in various age categories, you'll notice that 52 clients were aged 6 through 10, and 86 were aged 11 through 15. And a lot of times people think about counseling as something that adults engage in, and we certainly see our youth engaging in them as well, and certainly since COVID, they have even more. We served 217 counseling clients for 3,468 sessions. 88 of those clients were from Washington County, and 78 were living in Forest Lake. We don't turn clients away due to financial hardship, whatever that hardship might be. We had 33 clients that utilized our sliding fee scale for 303 sessions, and the total amount for that in our budget was almost $33,000 to make sure that those clients could get the services that they need. And 13 of those clients receiving assistance lived in Forest Lake. Our income comes from program fees, grants, as we've talked about, charitable gaming, special events. You have a flyer for the Taste of the Lakes, which is May 1st at Tanner's Brook. So you buy a ticket, and there's many restaurants that are there, and you go around and get to taste all the good food that's there. Municipalities and counties. And on the back of the annual report, you'll note those that have supported Lake Center in 2024, and most have done so in multiple years. And that includes the city of Forest Lake. The Forest Lake City Council's decision to enter into a 5-year agreement with Lake Center has been extremely helpful financially and helping us in our planning as well. And I also want to thank at this point Chief Peterson for serving on the Lake Center board for many years and as the board chair. When I was the executive director, he was also the board chair for 2 years, and his guidance and help and through some sometimes challenging times was appreciated, and he did a great job as the board chair and as a board member, so thank you. So on behalf of the board of directors, the staff, and our participants and clients, I thank you. So I certainly can answer any questions you may have, or if you think of them later, if I don't have the answer now, I can get back to you. So are there any questions that anyone has?
So, anyone have any questions for Dr. Mattson? No questions, but I just want to thank you for the service that you provide back to the community, your board members. The relationship that we have, the city has with the organization is outstanding. I appreciate Chief Peterson's time in this over the years, and if we can continue to strengthen and foster this relationship, I think the council would be open to that. So, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, next agenda item, 7B, petition for road improvement, Inman Avenue / 224th Avenue in Jolene. I was like, walk us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your packet, you'll note that a petition was received by some residents in the area of 224th and Inman Avenue. That petition is requesting an analysis of the costs that would be incurred to pave a portion of 224th and Inman Avenue. Some of 224th is already paved, so it wouldn't be a full pavement job. The petition is essentially requesting a feasibility study, and because a feasibility study incurs costs by the city, it's a decision that council needs to make to move forward with that feasibility study or not. So in your packet is the petition, but also a copy of a resolution which would authorize or declare the adequacy of the petition and order preparation of a feasibility report. If council elects to move forward with approval of that resolution, that would authorize Ryan and his team to complete a formal feasibility report. After that report is completed, council would analyze the details of the report and make a decision on moving forward with that project or not. The information would also be presented to the petitioners, who would not be obligated to move forward with a petition for road improvement. They could back out at that time, but were they to move forward after determining what the costs were, council would have to decide on assessments for the project as well. Mr. Jeff Garrettson, who has spearheaded the petition on behalf of the residents in that area, is here this evening and could stand for questions should council like to ask him any questions. I guess another point I'd just like to make, because the feasibility study does incur costs, staff time, engineering costs, if council's going to order that report be completed, that study be completed, I think council should also decide how that study would be paid for. So A, either the city just absorbs those costs, or B, the city asks the residents who have signed this petition to either enter into an escrow agreement or a bill back agreement. So those are the two questions before council tonight, whether to move forward and authorize the resolution, and then secondly, to determine the costs and who would be paying for those for the feasibility report.
Okay. Any questions initially here before we can start discussion on it?
Just one question is, and maybe the resident can answer better, is why now? Why is it before us now?
I figured that it was, excuse me, my name's Jeff Garrettson. I live at 224 Inman Avenue North. I didn't want to take your point. It came forth when we were at the meeting for North Shore, and we have tried to have Inman and 224th paved several times over the years, and at different times, the different residents there didn't want to have the assessments, and now everybody on the road, minus one person, is interested because the new neighborhood is creating much more traffic on the road, and they paved the one side of the road, but they didn't improve Irish Avenue, which creates a bottleneck. So all the new homeowners are taking the other way, which creates the problems that the rest of us residents are experiencing, so.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Jeff, as long as, Mr. Erickson, as long as he's up?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, 22410, that's your address?
Yes,
How many acres do you have there?
1.2.
And the parcel that's across the street, Inman, is that a vacant lot?
That is a DNR boat launch.
Boat launch? Okay, all right, that makes
And
sense.
when I started on this, I was just asking for Inman to be paved because of the added traffic at the boat launch due to the restaurant people parking there and the boat launch people. And seeing North Shore was being done, I figured that Inman would be, that one little segment on Inman would be easy. But then all the neighbors said, well, what about us? And so this is growing.
And the parcel then to the north, that's a pretty big parcel as well. Do you know how many acres that is?
To the north of me is the same size. I think it was a split lot, so they're about an acre and a quarter. But I improved my home 10 years ago, and our road was a full-service road, Inman was. And then I paid for an assessment to have my house close to the road. And then 2 years after that, they took that segment of Inman and made it a low-maintenance road. So from the corner of 224th North is low maintenance, and I'm responsible for keeping that road up. So, and I'm not looking to pave that section of the road. I was looking to just pave where the boat launch is and then 224th. So,
And forgive me, because I don't know this, water and sewers is there already?
we do not have water. We have city sewer.
Okay.
And there
And,
is not sewer in the road. All the sewer lines go down to North Shore.
okay. And of the houses I'm seeing on this map, how many signed the petition?
Everyone, every house that was present signed. There was one house that they reside in New Orleans over the winter, and they said yes, but they didn't sign it. And then the house behind me didn't sign it because they aren't actually, they're on the low maintenance road. And there was one house that doesn't have access to 224th, and we don't know what happened to them. They disappeared 2 months ago, and the house is basically vacant at the moment. So,
Thank you.
What's the tempo of the other neighbors if there's an assessment involved?
one neighbor is very apprehensive about the assessment. They signed yes, and they are very curious about the cost. The rest of the neighbors are really tired of the dust and the potholes and the washboards, and so, and the one neighbor that said no is also apprehensive about assessments, and he's having other issues at the moment, so extra costs aren't good for him.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Erickson? Staff, I know you weighed in on it's in the packet, but just publicly, concerns, Ryan, yourself, and/or Mark on this?
I think before Ryan gets into more of the technical stuff, I'll just note that, back of the napkin sketch estimates would have this, if you just looked at the number of parcels that are signing the petition, the order of magnitude here is tens of thousands of dollars per lot, not thousands of dollars. So just in that, it's gonna be closer to 30,000 than it is to 3 per parcel if you were to do it that way, which is what our assessment policy contemplates. Now, there's some nuance to that. There's the larger lots would be looked at to see if they could subdivide, and then they would be charged lot equivalents, sort of. So you could, and then if there's these other newer neighborhood, if there should be any assessments to them because they also use it, that could be looked at. But I just wanna everyone's mind in the right place that this is gonna be tens of thousands, not thousands, when we come down to it.
Have you reached out at all to that newer neighborhood?
No,
Okay.
everybody that's paved, we figured wasn't involved in this, but it makes sense. They're utilizing the road, so, and I don't think there's any plan to improve Irish, so the traffic's probably gonna keep going the other way, so. And the last time we did this, I think, was in 2005, and at that time, it was about $7,000 a parcel. So,
So with that back in the napkin guesstimate, does that give you some hesitation or pause, do you think, or yourself or other neighbors at that dollar amount?
no,
Okay. All right. Ryan, you have some?
Mayor, City Council. This area has some history, as the gentleman has outlined before you. Back in 2007, we didn't have watershed rules and requirements, and the density that's out there, right? So currently, Inman coming off of North Shore Trail is approximately 18 feet wide up to 224th. That portion of 224th is 16 feet wide. And I think the area that's being referred to as the low-maintenance roadway area is the portion of Inman that's north of 224th, and that's approximately 14 feet in width. Ideally, when we come in and do a road improvements, we're looking to at least obtain 20 feet, which is still less than the city standard. But in a rural area like this, that's what we would try to achieve, and supplements, you know, some gravel base and a geotextile below it with the sand in that area and 4 inches of pavement, which would align probably what the cost was back in '05, '07. Obviously, bituminous prices have gone way different than it was back then. Just some rough the back napkin, you know, with 12 accessible lots. But I remember back when this was going through that report process way back when, there were some of these lots that were gonna be considered 2 units, so two assessments. So I think some of the votes might change then if that's what would come out in the report, right? If you go to a full-blown feasibility study report. But if you have 12 lots, just some real quick costs without doing any design, or because we got some grades out there too, you might need curb and gutter in some areas to not to prohibit erosion. But now we got to catch the stormwater runoff and take it to an area to be treated before it can leave the area. So now accounting for stormwater, we're probably looking at a total project cost of anywhere between $380 and $440, which would mean approximately $30,000 to $36,000 per unit. And I don't know if you go through an appraisal process, how that would be justified. So if you do the 429 process, you're going to probably want to obtain a waiver of the 429 process. So that's the bad news, right? Because when you got to put in stormwater requirements, areas to treat that, you got to get the water there. So and that's where some of the curb and gutter is in here, and then just how narrow this roadway is. And when we lost the number of homes that previously would have been part of this project in 7, because when was it 2016 to 18, somewhere in there, and Third Lake Estates came in and built that new subdivision, that dead-end cul-de-sac. The developer negotiated to pave 224th only to the end of his plats and not carry it out with the traffic, but then was approved and allowed to just do a calcium chloride for the duration of that construction. That's why then you lose so many more number of units that would have been part of this assessment project back in '07. So that's why then again, you see a higher per unit cost with today's dollars, because you got less units too. That's the full picture that I know.
And I don't know if I missed it in the report here, is there a estimate cost for the
This
assessment?
was all done down on vacation.
I'm sorry, what was that?
This was done on vacation time, so.
I think the mayor's asking what's the cost of the report, Ryan?
Yeah, did I miss that?
Well, I think we need to all first set some barriers of what this is gonna be, right? And I think some conversations need to occur with Public Works and the fire chief first, before we know what we're even committing to. We need to have some separate conversations with the watershed district before we even get into that. And then just some high-level review of parcels with city staff on how we're going to either break that up or not, Obviously, we'll try to do it on as fast as we could, but I need to answer some of those questions first, so, because if it's wider than what I just kind of outlined, then we need to bring survey in to do that, to account for earthwork and stuff like that, but we don't want to have to go do all that if there's some other considerations to be put into the actual report. So it could vary what you would be, information to be put into it. So I think we definitely could have those conversations between now and the next city council meeting and bring that stuff back for the next council meeting easily. If it's the appetite to move forward based on just some of the stuff that we just talked about.
Again, Mr. Mayor, just sort of order of magnitude, you know, a feasibility report for something like this might run $10,000 to $15,000. Yeah.
Why wasn't it done before? Do you remember? Does anybody know? When, like, '07?
Costs. So there's a lot of these pockets throughout the city, and they all have a story, and they're all similar, that the proposed assessment was not supported.
Mr. Mayor, I think also serving on planning for as long as I have, there was always the hope that a couple of these parcels were gonna get developed into more lots, which would minimize the cost to the people that are currently there. And I think that was one of the other reasons why it never moved forward.
So I guess it's very rare that we have seemingly willing residents coming to us saying, yeah, I'm open to an assessment on improving roads. I think we need to take advantage of that, or at least welcome that. That said, you know, $10,000 to $15,000 a study is not insignificant. But if it's, with the pavement policy it is, where the homeowners are bearing this expense, if that's our only expense, or, I mean, we've got staff time and all the rest of that, I would be open to continuing this conversation. Now, maybe to Ryan's point, having some more initial conversations with the other parties involved, and then coming back to us to see what their, what their thought is on it, and then commit ourselves or not commit ourselves. We do have an option for this study to be escrowed in a bill back type situation as well, correct? So that still is an option for us.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that option, is gonna require all of the folks to sign up, unless the council had some other policy. But I think probably the best path forward here is just to let us bring this back to you. We'll have some conversations with the residents about that build back scenario, see how amenable they are to that. And then Ryan can have a more solid number on what that feasibility study costs. And we just work with a little bit better information. I think the idea tonight was just to get an idea of, is there any appetite at all? And, all the downer notes here, the upper notes are that we're doing a project right alongside here, and if we can get moving, we could probably incorporate this into something, at least an attractive bid for the current project, whoever wins the bid for North Shore, right? So there are some reasons to do it now, right, to try to do it now. So I do think it's worth the study, but we want to make sure that, the city's not out $15,000 on a goose chase of some sort, right? So.
Make sure there's some commitment. That's why I asked the question. I mean, that $30,000 is not a small number. I'm not a real estate appraisal person, but that value to be on a blacktop road is, you'd probably get some of that back, or a majority back, essentially. So if I meet someone in your shoes, I would be still considering it as well, even though, and I think it can be assessed over time, correct, at a very small, how many? 30 years. 30 years at a small interest rate, so that monthly, that yearly cost is, isn't that hard to take on. So are you have enough direction, or are you looking for motion at this point?
Mayor, I think we're at a place where if you're comfortable just tabling this to the next meeting would be great.
And I think as far as feedback from public safety and public works, if it means conceding not having what our standards are to get this road fixed, if it only has to be 18, I'm open to that too, because it's in a better position. That end goal would be better than we are right now, on a potholes and washboard and road and all that. So, do you need a motion to table, or we just?
Yeah.
May I speak one more?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Yep.
So I believe that we started this without a lot of information, and you were working on a document that would help lay out the procedures and lay out what possible costs could be. And having that before would have helped a lot. And I'm willing to go back and talk to all the neighbors and test the temperature of what, you know, the number might be, but we had no idea at all what the number would be.
Sure.
And so I don't know if you could estimate it a little closer, talk to everyone, and at least have something that I can go back verbally to all the neighbors. I can come back with the answer. I can share the answer with you, what they really feel, if the number really is gonna be 30,000 over 30 years, or if it's gonna be 5,000 in 5 years. You know, that's important for them to make their decisions, so.
Well, I would suspect, Ryan, you're not too far off on that number, right? You do this for a living, so you have a pretty good idea. But maybe that's part of the conversation between now and the next council meeting with you know, representative here or maybe some of the other neighborhood people. I don't know.
If I had the information, I could have that back for next council meeting.
Well, Mr. Mayor, we'll work with the resident here
yeah.
and his other folks and be able to come to a resolution to
Okay.
bring back to you whether we're heading in the right direction or not. I think we'll be able to have that order of magnitude discussion.
All right. And remind, do we need a motion to table?
Either way,
That's
Yes,
okay. So
please.
It'd be
yes.
nice.
All right. So do I have a motion to table the petition or the road improvement conversation on Inman and 224th?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes, thank you. Next item, 7C, Forest Lake Street Reconstruction Bonding. We have a representative here from Ellers. I don't know if some staff's going to kick this off, or we'll go right to Dan here.
Yeah, I can kick this off just quickly. As you know, we are moving forward, well, at least we're gonna move forward with getting bids on North Shore Drive. The cost of that project necessitates a bond or for lack of a better term, a loan that the city can take out. And so we have representatives here from Ellers tonight to walk through the more technical details of that. We did published in the paper a notice that's had sort of a higher amount than we are gonna talk about tonight. Tonight, we're gonna talk about the lower amount after that chunk of the project was eliminated, the $1 million or so was eliminated. So we'll be talking in terms of 5 to 5.5 million, depending on which number we're end up talking about. There's some nuance to what that total is that I won't try to get into. We'll let the experts tell you that. But so that's just the long and short of it is, just like a construction project, there's a bid that's put out for a bond. And so different banks bid on it, just like contractors bid on a construction project. And so I think that's what Dan's gonna walk you through, so.
Great. All right, welcome, thank you.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. As mentioned, my name is Dan Tinter. I'm municipal advisor with Ellers. I'm here on behalf of Bruce Kimmel, who sends his apologies, but he is in Mexico right now on spring break. So, and regrets he can't be here this evening. As mentioned by the city administrator, we're here this evening really for two items. The first is consideration of a street reconstruction and overlay plan, and there is an associated public hearing with those proceedings. And assuming the council ultimately decides to move forward with the plan, there's also included in your packet a resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds in the form of what we call a pre-sale, which is essentially the council's approval to say, okay, go forth and do well, solicit the bids on our behalf, and then come back to us in a bit of time and discuss the results. And then at that point, you'd have the opportunity to award the sale of the bonds. In discussing the two items, we'll take the street reconstruction and overlay plan first. Generally in the state of Minnesota, you have the option to borrow for any number of items, but most of the time under state law, it actually says you need to go to a referendum and ask the general public for essentially their say-so to issue the debt. There are a number of exceptions under law in order to accomplish that, and one such exception is the consideration and approval of a street reconstruction plan. As mentioned by the city administrator, in order to accomplish this, first you have to provide a notice and then hold a public hearing. That public hearing has to be held within 10 to 28 days of the notice. And then at the public hearing, any members of the public need to be provided the opportunity to provide any comments on the plan. And then if the council thinks it's so in order, you can close the public hearing and then, of course, take action on the plan itself. Once the plan is adopted, however, if the council decides is in order, it doesn't quite end the process. One of the other items you have to get through is what we call a 30-day reverse referendum period, where after the plan is adopted, interested residents have the opportunity to petition the city. If they secure a petition of 5% of the eligible voters from the last general election, then they can force the bond to a referendum, and the council cannot issue the debt unless the actual issuance is approved by a referendum. So we have these extra steps essentially to have a little process, and if you go through all of them, then you do not have to put the bond issue directly to referendum. And so that's the reason for these multiple steps in the process. Ultimately, most of the time, the street reconstruction plans tend not to be very controversial. They're usually fairly straightforward. I've personally never seen a reverse referendum petition on a bond of this nature, but ultimately there is some process. After the plan is approved, if the council decides to move forward, then the next step in the process would be approve a resolution authorizing the sale and issuance of the bonds. At that point in time, we would essentially wait the 30 days, and then much like the city administrator referenced, after that, we would prepare something called an official statement, which you can think of as like a prospectus for like a stock that you may trade in your personal lives. That prospectus is actually put out competitively to the entire bond underwriting market, and so it's not uncommon sometimes to get banks from Texas and Pennsylvania and California all over the place buying these bonds because they're doing so for their funds or their own investors. At that point in time, once we receive the bids, we award on the true interest cost, or basically the interest rate of the bonds. And then that evening, the council will be furnished with the bid results along with a recommendation from Ellers and staff, if it's so in order, to accept the bids and award the bonds. Once the bonds are awarded, you can think of that as kind of signing the purchase agreement, and then usually about 3 weeks later, we'll have a closing, and that's when the money is actually wired and made available to the city, so you can start paying for the project authorized under all of that process I just described. So those are all the moving parts. As my lawyer friends say, there's quite a few ins and outs, but I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have about the street reconstruction plan and the process related to that, or the call for sale or the bonds themselves.
Great. Thanks for putting that in layman's terms for the most part. Appreciate that.
Do my best.
Any questions to the council on this?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you explain, is this issuance going to be accompanied by a rating I'm missing the term, a rating evaluation? Help me out with the term.
Yeah, a credit rating. Your Honor, members of the council, if you look at the pre-sale report included in your packet on page 4 of the pre-sale report, there's actually a proposed debt issuance schedule. And you will notice that the week of April 28th, 2025, that's when we would have what we call the due diligence call. That's when the city administrator and the finance director get to walk through a multi-question questionnaire asking a number of questions about the financial health and status of the city. And then along in that week, there's also a conference with a credit rating agency. And typically that takes the form of a virtual meeting with the credit rating analysts. They will ask a series of questions about the management practices of the city, its financial health, its current leverage, the state of its economy, and usually a few miscellaneous questions. Using that information, plus the information in the official statement related to the bond, along with a number of other documents that they'll ask the staff for, like your audited financial statements, your current budget, your top 10 taxpayers, et cetera. They will then furnish an opinion on the creditworthiness of the municipality. That opinion is independent, and it is their judgment of the city, and it's used by the folks that underwrite the bonds as an independent analysis. Ultimately, the credit rating is used to attach the interest rate that the folks will bid on your bonds with, because generally the interest rate is a proxy for the riskiness that the city may default on the bonds, and so that credit rating helps translate that risk into something that they can distill for the day of bid purposes.
And if you could just explain the calculation in your mind or your firm's mind just as to why we should do that, because there is a cost to that. And I'm assuming you determined that the offset of getting better bids because we have a credit rating with this is far offsets the cost of doing that rating?
Your Honor, members of the council, yes, that's absolutely correct. So the reason you ultimately go through the credit rating process is you can sell bonds on an unrated basis, but generally you would receive a much higher interest rate on those bonds because the underwriters and banks that would be bidding would not necessarily have the independent opinion of the credit rating agencies to inform the risk-adjusted decision they need to make when bidding on the bonds. So ultimately, if you have a relatively, in this case, high credit rating, the city is a AA+, so just one from the top, you would receive a much more preferential interest rate, and then over the life of the bonds, the interest payable on those bonds would be significantly less than if you had a lower rating or if you sold the bonds competitively on an unrated basis. That's really a long way of saying that the cost of the credit rating is much, 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 much less and far exceeded by the interest rate savings that the city would experience over the life of the bonds, and ultimately the cost that would be passed along to the taxpayers in the form of the property tax levy that supports the debt service. So you end up saving money, a lot of money, by spending a little money up front.
Makes sense. Thank you for walking us through that. So next steps here would be go into a public hearing on this? Is that correct? Okay.
Your Honor, members of the council, yeah, if the council deems it to be so in order, you would open the public hearing and then give the opportunity for any members of the public to provide comment on the plan.
All right. With that, at 7:41, I'm going to open the public hearing on the issuance of $5.5 million general bond obligation for street reconstruction. This specifically is on the North Shore project, which we've been working with and discussing since, well, almost a year now. And so if there's anyone in the public that's interested to speak to this, please come up, state your name and address, and we'll hear what you have to say. Just leave it open for just a couple more moments.
Mayor, while we fill the void here, I'll just make sure that we note that the public hearing is very specifically for the street reconstruction plan. It's a bit of a nuance there.
Okay.
Although the North Shore project is prominent in that plan, it is part of a larger
That's right.
plan,
Okay.
and that's why we're able to issue these bonds the way we are, so.
Thank you for clarifying that, correcting that. All right, anyone interested in coming to speak on this? Okay, I will close the public hearing at 7:42 and bring it back to council and/or staff or Eller's representative to.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'll make a motion for moving forward with resolution approving a street reconstruction plan and the issuance of general obligation street reconstruction bonds. I think it's been labeled 03-24-2507.
Great, we have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And is there anyone interested in making a motion on the next resolution?
I'll make a motion that we move forward with resolution 03-24-2508, the resolution providing for the issuance and sale of the general obligation street reconstruction bonds series 2025A in the proposed aggregate principal amount of $5.5 million.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
A second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council, and we'll be seeing you on or around May 12th to discuss the bids on the bonds.
Great, thanks for walking us through this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Right, next item, 7D, Hidden Creek South Concept Plan Review, and Abby?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Blake, Mayor Roberts, members of the council. Up on the screen, you'll see a site location that the city has received a concept plan for a subdivision of 2 parcels. The proposal from Headwaters Land Group is an extension of the current Hidden Creek neighborhood. This is Hidden Creek South, so it would be the additions 4 through 8, kind of keeping that roadway kind of coming back around, looping around to Headwaters Parkway, extending the parkway on. Just as a reminder for the council and for newer members who maybe aren't as familiar, concept plans are an opportunity for the city to provide informal feedback. This is non-binding feedback, but it's information to give to the developer so that the developer has enough to go back and to start preparing preliminary platting documents. So as a reminder, we have a 3-step subdivision process: concept plan, which we're at now, preliminary plat, and then final plat. You will see this again with a lot more refinement. So on a high level, what the developer would be proposing to do is to subdivide the 2 parcels into 173 new lots that it range between 50 feet wide and 60 feet wide. 65 feet wide. Those 65 feet wide foot wide lots that you are shown up there in red, and those really kind of extend the existing neighborhood characteristics that we have in Hidden Creek. The bluish lots to the east are 50-foot wide lots and are a newer product that would be developed by Capstone Homes, newer to Forest Lake, but not newer by Capstone, who would be the anticipated builder for this development's extension. They are the current builder in Hidden Creek. So just as a frame of reference, the property is a part of the final planned unit development of Headwaters neighborhood. So this is a pretty old planned development that actually started as a partnership between the city and the private development community. Highway 61, that development of Headwaters Parkway. We've got the County Service Center, the YMCA, the library. We've got the Fenway Athletic Complex. We've got some residential neighborhoods that got built out. There's the Headwaters 123 site that was originally slated for residential. It's been changed. Now we're moving to the west of Fenway Avenue. We've built out the single-family neighborhood to the north, and we're working on that Hidden Creek to the northwest. Hidden Creek South kind of lands in this southeast of the Parkway extension and had been guided for both single-family and townhomes. So while the underlying zoning district is the MXR1 zoning district and would require a minimum 65-foot wide lot and a 7,500 square foot lot, the PUD did contemplate some home sizes smaller with those townhomes. So one thing that's noted in the staff report is even though these are not attached townhomes, they have a narrower home, a narrower lot feel that can sometimes be, some communities, depending on definitions, a detached townhome. We don't have that in our code right now, but that is kind of similar to what would have been partially contemplated in this area. So overall, with the development pattern that you see right here, the development has an estimated density of 3.07 units per acre. Comp plan requires this to be a minimum of 3 units per acre. So we're just barely above that threshold. There's the anticipation that after wetland delineation and those sorts of things, that density might increase a little, but not much. So those 50-foot homes are contributing to us being able to achieve that density. It's partially what is helping for the consistency with the comp plan. Planned unit developments, we use them not necessarily to break the rules, but where there's challenging sites where we might be able to preserve environmental resources, where we might be able to create greater neighborhoods, such as you saw with the Headwaters design, right? The intention really was to create this kind of neighborhood feel, and this is an extension of that. The question of going smaller than the minimum lot size in the zoning district and that older planned unit development is something that the Planning Commission, when they reviewed it, were concerned about, as well as the smaller roadway widths that could be proposed with the development. Predominantly, they're concerned for things like on-street parking, the number of driveways, and the ability to just be able to maneuver through these tighter neighborhoods, especially for things like public safety concerns. Overall, the development, we do comment on just pedestrian connectivity, not only along in the development, but along the parkway on both sides. The idea being we'd have trails on the north and south or east and west, depending on which way you look at the parkway in that alignment. So that we can really continue kind of those looped designs, and it really helps us with maintenance when we've got those trails on both sides. A couple things that we will note, we are currently working on a parkway alignment study that really does look at how Headwaters Parkway will connect with Elmcrest. The Headwaters, the Hidden Creek, I believe, contemplated it curving around 195th. We're studying that as well as the Elmcrest design. The proposed alignment from the developer kind of follows along more that middle property line, kind of almost straddling that property line. So we have advised the developer that we might need to reconfigure some of that parkway design as we learn more information as we're doing our study. Looking at the PUD, one thing the development is proposing and originally contemplated with Hidden Creek was the acquisition of more land for public green space, a park that would straddle the current Hidden Creek neighborhood and then the future kind of south neighborhood. This parkland to be dedicated would have some potentially active recreational and passive recreation, though it has not been reviewed by the Parks Commission. Brand new Parks Commission, we thought we'd give them a meeting before bringing this concept back to them. The former Parks Commission did review this. They did like the idea of land dedication to help serve this residential neighborhood. This is a lot of homes. Hidden Creek itself is, that's being developed right now is 125. Hidden Creek South is 173. You know, we've got 300, potentially 300 families that right in this area. So this will be going to the Parks Commission in April. Also, when it comes to planned unit developments, again, that idea that we want to do some site design, but then we also kind of look at if we're going to make concessions on things like lot sizes and potential roadway widths, what are some of those public considerations? What is the public benefit for breaking the rules? So the developer notes and the builder note in their narrative included and made comment to the Planning Commission. Smaller lots generally means lower prices on homes. That's just a smaller lot, a smaller home. That's one thing that is identified as a public benefit, and then also just that possibility of that community park being built out. One thing I didn't mention just now about parkland is we have talked with the developer about the potential for a little bit of land dedication in the southwest corner that could be added to other land dedications or other subdivisions for a small pocket park, maybe just open green space, so kids that are to the south of the parkway had some open space to go to, didn't always have to cross the parkway to get to the larger park. The developer has been advised we do have the JD4 stormwater study in this area, so they do know they need to account for some of that existing judicial ditch stormwater. So the design that you see here might alter some. That's certainly an area that we also could look at potentially some green space for the neighborhood. Overall, the plan, generally conforms to the underlying older PUD. It's consistent with the comp plan in that it's meeting those density requirements. The Planning Commission did, however, express their concern, as I shared with you. Those smaller lot sizes and those narrower roads are just a concern over overall neighborhood livability. And then just in general, going smaller than the original PUD was a concern. So tonight with us is John Dobbs with Headwaters Land Group. He's here to chat with you about this if you have any questions for him or if you have any questions for me.
Great, thanks. Any initial questions of council?
Abby, I have a question. When planning looked at this, did they look at the lots that are backing up to Headwaters Parkway? And did they talk about things like berms, landscaping, trees versus fences? One of the things that I know we were trying to pay close attention to in Headwaters was not having a bunch of fences along Headwaters. And so I guess my first initial thought is, has there been any discussion about some way to not have your backyards right on headwaters, you know, without having fences in terms of berms or trees or landscaping?
They did not. I do, I wouldn't anticipate this as a neighborhood that's going to have an HOA, but, and we don't have any design standards that would prohibit fences. So I do think that as a PUD mechanism, we might be able to look at those as a potential opportunity. If not prohibition of fences, but fence materials, so that we're not having that solid wall. I know that that is something usually of a concern, but it hasn't been brought up yet thus far.
Good point there. Any other initial questions? Mr. Dobbs, would you like to come up and speak to the project?
Good evening, John Dobbs, Headwaters Land Group. Abby covered most of it. I would like to talk a little bit about the need for the Liberty, which is what Capstone refers to them as, the blue design. You have some, Mark, thank you. Back when the PUD study was done for the original Headwaters area, and I hate to admit it, but I've been doing this for a while, and back then we did a lot of attached product, and a lot of different builders did townhouses, back-to-back row houses, things like that. Over the last 20 years, though, with the increase in cost of building code, insurances, association law, and a lot of other factors, it's actually become more expensive to do attached product. This detached small single family is actually more affordable. And when I say affordable, it's not a legal term, but right now I had a loan officer from Bell Mortgage, Bell Bank, do some initial kind of stuff for me before the Planning Commission. And to buy the most affordable single-family house right now that Capstone is going to put in the second phase and into the third phase of what we currently have going on, the red lots, you need to make $100,000 a year with no debt. That's a number for a salary. The smaller ones, the ones that are on the screen right now, $75,000, $72,500 is your salary base. So, that was what my first house cost in 1993. So this is as affordable single-family, detached, new construction as you can do these days in the metropolitan area, unless you go way out. And so it's just trying to provide homes for people at a variety of different price points. So that's the need for it. That's why Capstone asked to do it. There are several different communities of this product, some in Ramsey, which I've been involved in, representing some landowners up there for what Capstone has built. They also have it down in Cottage Grove. I believe we sent the addresses in, so.
You did, yep. I just didn't include them in the display materials, but I certainly can pull that up.
So if you wanted to take a road trip and go take a look, Abby could give you addresses for what the product type looks like. And then just briefly, the other couple things I'd like to touch on is that the road width that we're proposing in the new side is no different than what we did on the north side. We're not asking for anything other than what we've already done. And again, it's to affordability. And I understand that there's some issues. I've heard about them. Abby just mentioned them. Narrower roads when communities are used to wider roads. But decisions about size and decisions about road widths have consequences related to cost and affordability, and they just do. And, I'd love to be able to do more affordable stuff. Be great. It's just almost impossible to do for a variety of factors, including zoning, including cost, including insurances, including raw material costs, all the above. So we're just trying to find a way through. Interest rates are up a lot in the last year. So that's the world I live in anyway. And then the only other thing is just I would like to talk a little bit about parks, and I heard your comment about fences, and that's very helpful. I've never heard that one before, but I'll take a look at it as I look at the lots on the east side of future Headwaters in particular. That's a row of, so yeah, maybe we can pull them apart, put a small berm in there or something, and maybe, something, I'll take a look at that. And then the other one is the park, and I actually was, I presented in front of the old park commission, and not only did they want land in the center, but they also, we talked about the idea of us building the park up front and trying to get it built, not just dedicating land. And that's been our goal for a while, and it's still our goal now. I think we're going to be in the Parks Commission next month, and I'm going to talk about that in a more formal way. But we would like to try to use not only land, but the actual design process itself, try to allocate some of the funds that we've already paid in and future funds and just build it, not wait. I did back 3 years ago, I think, it's all kind of bleeds together, but I think that was when the Park Commission met last time. I sat through a number of meetings where there was a lot of discussion about parkland in the city. And one of the things I heard said was it would be good to get a park and it get built all at once, and that seemed to be something that the city had struggled with in the past. It's important to us, it's important to the builder, it's important to the neighbors that are already there. First phase went great, 22-21. Families live there now. About $10 million in real estate value. When we do the second phase, it'll be close to $18 million. They're already halfway through the second phase, and it got paved on Thanksgiving Day or the day before Thanksgiving. So project's going great, and all those people would like a place to take their families and do things. That's a concept. I think parking lot and volleyball courts and some other things, we're kind of, the staff has been very helpful in giving some feedback. We're working through some of that. But yeah, so we're pretty excited, and the project's going great. So I'll answer any other questions if you have them.
Actually, I just have a couple of questions for Abby. One is, the park or the planning commission's concerned about the 50-foot wide lots. What's the plan to hit that 3.0 or greater without having smaller lots?
It's a really great question. You hope that there's more wetland on the area that's grossing out you're netting out some of the land. But this is just one of the biggest challenges we're facing with the requirements that we have to meet those minimum standards. You've seen the plats in front of you over the years. It's extremely difficult. And we have reduced our lot sizes in the MXR1 district already down to the minimum 7,500 from 12,000 square feet, but that hasn't been enough. Mm-hmm. The other option is not allowing, I can't say not allowing, but putting in more attached housing because we do allow for a minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet. So those attached units you can up to 8 of them. We are seeing some of those new ones being built. We have a lot of attached product in the community. This is definitely a different alternative, I would say, than what we've seen thus far. Mm-hmm. But the only other way is the Met Council changing its requirements of what we can net out of our development densities. Mm-hmm. I've been a strong advocate, on behalf of the city to the Met Council really trying to reconsider what they allow us to net out. That parkland area will be able to net out, trails will be able to net out, but our internal roadways, or the parkway we might be able to net out, but the internal roadways, storm ponds, those sorts of things, they just don't let us net out. Mm. So maybe there'll be further conversation with them. Mm-hmm. But the options are limited. It's push them closer together is really one of our only options.
Second question is just, where are things at with that alignment study of headwaters? So as the developer continues making progress, what's our timing on that?
Sure. I can let Ryan give us a better update. I do know in the fall, we kind of got a late start with the wetland delineations. He can give us a more delineated estimate on that timeline.
Well, there's quite a few components to the study. Some of them we're actually going to be talking about this week with our staff, but our wetland delineators are waiting until we can resume the wetland work in the field, and then after that's all completed, we're probably a month behind that. So middle May at the latest, I would say, somewhere in there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Yep, I'll just make a general comment, Mr. Mayor and council members. On planning, the biggest struggle we had was in almost all of these neighborhoods, the wetlands. And yes, we can get bigger lots in all these neighborhoods, but it would reduce the number of lots we can put in because of the wetlands, which means the cost is so exorbitant, these developers can't build in there. They won't buy them, they won't do it. So that's why we've gone to the smaller lots or pushed the smaller lots so they can get enough lots to make it more affordable.
Mayor Roberts, if I might just piggyback on Councilmember Miller's comment there. Industry trends, we are seeing that a lot of, especially first-time home buyers, don't want a big house and don't want a big yard. We're also seeing people who had big houses and big yards and want relatively low free maintenance. This does offer that in a neighborhood setting, which I think can help create greater community when people still own, still have their little bit of space, have access to those green spaces, aren't a slave to their yard. Speaking from experience, I think, more than anything. So I think that there's a desire for this, and I think that it would be a nice product to bring to Forest Lake. But I do understand the Planning Commission's concerns about driveway, a larger garage has a larger driveway, and if you're taking up half the lot for a driveway, where are people gonna park, right? So, and the developer has heard this and knows this, and I think we might be able to explore other options for how we can kind of get creative in getting some of those concerns reduced.
Mr. Gobbs, those 3 miles that you show on the screen, are they on a 50-foot lot or are they on the 65-foot lot?
The ones on the screen are a 50-foot lot. And, anecdotal information at best, but I've developed in other states, including Florida. And what usually ends up happening is the lot gets smaller, and I understand Minnesota. I've been here for 43 years. But the smaller the lot, the more creative the space ends up being. People really put more time and effort, like Abby's talking about, into the backyards and trying to make some creative private space. It still works, and 6,300 square feet, is that what we kind of thought generally an average, what the smaller lots was gonna be?
I think so, yeah.
Something like
Just
that?
under 65, 60,
Yeah. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the ordinance is 7,200?
75, but
75.
the PUD was 7,
Yep.
so it's not,
And-
it's about 10% less than the PUD requirement.
There's a reason that places where things are very expensive, Florida, West Coast, East Coast, got smaller and smaller, and why that's happening here are economics. And, the ordinance that was written 20 years ago and the types of product we were doing 20 years ago, we don't do it anymore, and the builders don't build it anymore. They just can't. The ones that do attached are nationals for the most part. Publicly owned from somewhere else. Capstone is locally owned, 5th biggest builder in the Twin Cities, and they are private, and they've been here. They're out of Ramsey. Ben Minks is the owner, does a great job. So this is a Minnesota company trying to compete and work in Minnesota. So, for what it's worth.
Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a couple of quick comments. As the Planning Commission discussed, one of the issues is just driveway density, I'll call it. If you have a 50-foot wide lot and you see a double garage here, that driveway's gonna be at least 20 feet wide, if not 24. 24-foot wide driveway on a 50-foot lot. If you get 2 feet of snow, that means now you have 4 feet of snow on your yard, my rough math tells me, right? So, that becomes a problem, our plows go through, and that's not a problem for us, right? But it's a problem for the neighbors to try to find a place for that snow. That gets tough, especially in the cul-de-sacs. That's even worse now, and that becomes a difficult thing for our folks when they're clearing cul-de-sacs. It's a whole nother operation. Then just the other item here that I wanted to make sure everyone remembers is that PUDs are an exchange of relaxation of your code for a public benefit. And so there's that important part there that there's an exchange. We want to get something for giving something. And the developers laid out a number of things, including affordability of housing, and those are good things. I think it's my preference to push for a bit more of the public benefit. You mentioned the build out of the park, but as I understood it, the contemplation was to use funds that are already paid, have already been paid, and funds that are gonna be paid in terms of the park funds that are already required. So not going above and beyond, but we can discuss that more, obviously, is whether or not they'd be going above and beyond, right? We're looking for a public benefit that goes beyond the requirements. So it's not just utilizing the funds we were gonna have to pay to build out a park. We wanna see additional park funds or additional benefit to the public beyond what's already required. So again, there's that exchange, a relaxation for, you know, why should the public allow these standards to be relaxed? So that's just an overarching theme I wanna make sure we don't lose sight of.
So what are the next steps? This goes back to planning and
Nope, the next steps, the developer will meet with the Parks Commission at their next meeting in April to talk specifically about the park plan. We'll also bring up a couple of those ancillary items that we talked about, the potential for a little bit more green space south of the parkway. Also, even though it's preliminary, what kind of public amenities might we be able to achieve around the storm ponding associated with JD4, we don't know, but things that we'll bring up. Then the developer goes and decides if they want to move forward with the development and starts to work on their preliminary plans for resubmittal. Generally, before preliminary plans are submitted to the city, we have at least one pre-application meeting with the developer to see if we're working in the same direction. We have a great working relationship with Headwaters Land Group. It'd probably be more than one, just so you know, to see that we can't get that plan closer to what works for everybody. Then they submit for preliminary plat that goes to the Planning Commission, who makes recommendation to the council. I'd have to double check our code to see if that Parks Commission also makes recommendation on the preliminary plat. Then it comes back before you. If the council approves the preliminary plat, then they can move forward with final plat. What we have been doing in these phased developments is approving a preliminary for the entire 4 phases. And then they would just come back with final plat as each of the kind of phased areas develop. So you might remember that with Hidden Creek, you've now seen 3 final plats come before you. You've still got a small area left in Hidden Creek to plat out as well. So entire process, if you look at the preliminary plat process, 60 to 120 days, I think actually statutorily we might have 120 days. Final plat, another 60 days. So we're, 6, maybe a little bit more months out before things could get finalized. Kind of at the baby start of things, but it's also kind of odd because we're just kind of carrying that Hidden Creek neighborhood through, so.
Mr. Dobbs, ideally, do you want to be in the ground before we freeze up next fall on this?
I'm sorry?
Ideally, do you want to be in the ground on this project before things?
We've already got the 3rd phase pretty much teed up, which is another 45 lots past what's already out there. So this would probably be a 26-ish project. So the way Capstone's going through with momentum, it'd be 26 when we'd be doing the concept land. But I really like the 120 days part. That was awesome. I will also say, yeah, it's been a tough project for a variety of reasons. We've had some really difficult years, both weather-wise and some soil conditions we didn't find. I will say the staff, overall, to me, the success is about agreeing to disagree and trying to figure out how to work through that. And the communication, even if I'm totally not on the same page as they are, vice versa, we seem to work through it. And even though it's, so to me, that's really the strength here. I'm a fan, even if I want to pull my hair out once in a while. But at least it's still here, it's just gray, so.
No, that's great feedback, and that is, it's striking a balance. It has to be a win-win, and so we appreciate your continued interest in Forest Lake and your group and staff's efforts to try to move this thing forward, so thank you for the time.
Yeah, when we come back, I'll bring Capstone with me.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, 7E, request for proposals, classification, and comprehensive study. Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is kind of something we discussed a little bit at the, or it's born out of at least some of the staffing discussion we had at the work session. And I've had a chance the last couple of weeks here to review a few of the documents and studies that took place ahead of me in the last couple of years here. And some of those contemplated this exact thing here, which is to kind of have a reset on our staffing compensation and make sure that we're up to snuff with some of the laws that are revolve around this issue. And then just because the market has just been so volatile over the last few years in terms of salaries and that kind of thing. It's very common, most cities of your size will, maybe every 10 years or so have this sort of reset where you just kind of check yourself against the market, make sure people are properly classified. Someone's job description might have been written 10 years ago and, over the morphing of the staff, their duties change, and we want to kind of make sure that we reset those as well. So this is a nice way to do that. We'd send it out for proposals to a number of different firms and get some of those back, and then kind of go from there. So it's a fairly simple and straightforward, and I think most consultants in this realm know exactly what this is all about. And it's something that's important, I think, in our negotiations with the unions. They're all kind of looking forward to this too, to make sure that we understand whether we're above the median in the area or below, or where we're at with some of those. And some of it might be we're above on some job categories and below on others. And then I kind of want to bring this all back to, along with this, is to have the council discuss as part of a strategic plan where you want to be in terms of pay and compensation overall. And I think that's the other thing we want to make sure we're talking in terms of overall compensation, not just salary, but your benefits package and all that kind of thing. So we'll have a discussion during our strategic planning process as well about, do we want to be right in the middle as a median? Some cities will set, they want to be at the 60% mark, they want to be at the 40% mark, they want to be somewhere in between. They might set some parameters on certain things. So that's a discussion I think we want to have. It all relates to retention and attraction of quality employees. So it's all very important stuff. I do think this is something that a consultant is best. It really separates any staff members from it. It keeps it a very third-party analysis, and I think that is a big part of this as well. And so, as I understand it, this is part of the budget as well that was contemplated for 2025. So we're bringing that forward to have you authorize us to go out for proposals for this important study.
Great, thanks. Council, you have any questions on this?
No questions, just a comment. I mean, I'm very supportive of this. I know, as we've worked over the last couple of years of, tackling some of the things that need to be tackled. One of them is staff. And so getting this in place, I think would be really important as we continue to make progress on that big rock.
I agree.
Retention is a good thing.
Important, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Anyone interested in making a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to authorize staff to send out requests for proposals to qualified firms for a classification and compensation study.
Second?
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. Next item here is a housing legislation resolution. Mark, are you going to lead us on this one too?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, this issue is before us. It was before you last year about this time as well. Typically, I'm a type of person, I don't like to bring legislation in front of every piece of legislation does not need your vote or anti-vote, right? I don't think that the city council should be in the business of weighing in on every piece of legislation. But this particular set of legislation, and I don't think I'm alone in this concern, is just so overarching and so bearing on cities, that it does merit your attention and I think your voice. And as you decided last year, or this council decided last year to let the legislature know in no uncertain terms that we oppose it, I think it's, again, good to reiterate because the bills have, again, reared their heads, and there's different forms of them this year. They're trying different things, but it's all the same stuff in a different package. And it's very concerning. We're talking about, tonight we were talking about whether or not we should have duplexes or triplexes in a neighborhood. That goes out the window. You don't get that control anymore in a number of these bills. That decision is made for you. And by the way, a lot of the bills don't allow the public to even have an input on that, or at least limit public input to one meeting or something. So a number of these bills just are very concerning, taking away things like parking restrictions, minimum lot sizes, all sorts of things that the authors think will solve the housing crisis. And I think that's the biggest thing I want to impart to you here as well, is that it's certainly my view and the view of many others, I believe, that not only is this legislation overreaching, but it just won't solve the problem. The problem exists on a number of different levels. It's a multifaceted issue, obviously, but the things they're attacking are really trying to squeeze blood out of a turnip that's already been squeezed a lot. And I don't think that what they're doing here is gonna solve any sort of housing crisis. Interest rates and cost of construction and all that kind of thing are much, much more of an influence on that issue. Certainly there are things here and there that could be done differently, but none of the issues that are being brought up here are really gonna be any game-changing movement. And what I really also find ironic is that what this is really gonna do is incentivize developers to go around and look for the cheapest lot in town to tear down an affordable house and build 3 houses that are not affordable. You can imagine if developers had free reign to put a triplex or a quad or whatever in any old neighborhood, they would go around town and negotiate with people who are living in, housing that is affordable, right? They would find the cheapest house in town and say, how about I buy out your house for $200,000? And the person thinks, it's not a bad deal for me. Now there goes one of our affordable houses in town, and in comes $300,000-$400,000, duplex, triplex, whatever it is. So it's very difficult to build new housing without deep subsidies, right? And so building new housing to solve an affordable housing process isn't something I think is really viable. What we need to be doing is lifting up people who have affordable housing and making sure that they can sustain that. And there are programs for that. I wish they would put their efforts into supporting those more. So that's enough of my soapbox. I think the last council, I think, certainly understood it, and I'd be open to questions from this council as well.
Questions? Correct me if I'm wrong, but is this really have bipartisan support in a lot of cases?
It does, and it's a very strange bedfellows. I think the left is seeing it from wanting to solve I think everyone's trying to solve a housing crisis, right? Obviously, oftentimes the left is a bit more sympathetic to that cause. I think the right here is hearing it from builders, the former Builders Association of Twin Cities, whatever they're called now. So there's some contractors and stuff that are aligned maybe a little bit more with the right that are saying, it's not our fault, it's the cities that are standing in our way with all these regulations and red tape and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's bipartisan support here. I did mention this to both Representative Hill and Representative Anderson when I was able to speak with them on our day on the Hill. They both gave me different responses, and I think they're both understood the complexity of this and understood the importance of getting this right. But that is the bigger fear, is that there is, in an era where we have very polarized legislature, there is some support on both sides of the aisle for this. So,
Is there an ability of the city to request, if you will, a town hall of our state representatives to come to speak to this to the public, so that our residents can, share that feedback. It's easy to say, well, just go ahead and email them or whatever, but a lot of times it just doesn't happen. And I don't know if we would get a big contingent, but this somehow it seems like you're not hearing much of this in the media. It's really pretty quiet, and I don't know how we get that so that the general public, specifically our residents, know about this, because this could affect us. I mean, this would be not good, obviously, and so I don't know how.
Yeah, we can certainly talk with our legislators about that. Obviously, during the session, it's very tough to get their time. But maybe just some efforts to get more media attention certainly as well. We could try to do some of that.
Is this likely to be this year? I mean, this legislative session is that's how fast this could be?
Yes, yeah. And there's not one bill, it's a dozen bills, all trying to attack it from a different angle, and I'm trying to find support. There's only, the only one I know that is sort of, I'll say on our side, and maybe I won't even characterize it that way, but Senator Gustafson, who is the senator from the Centerville and part south area, sort of, I think, heard her constituents or the cities that are in her district, and a group of those mayors and administrators got together and working with her and the League of Minnesota Cities on a sort of an alternative bill. It still has some of the same elements. I think it's just a little bit softer approach, and I don't know the status of that bill at the moment, but I know that there are at least some legislators trying to introduce a bit of an alternative. So,
is it overstepping to post this letter or this resolution on social media to be able to get that word out at all?
if it's successfully voted by your council here, there's no reason
To basically contact your state rep, if you're unhappy or disagree or agree with it, I guess.
Yeah, certainly if it passes, I don't see an issue with that.
Any other questions?
No.
Anyone interested in making a motion on this?
I'll make a motion for the resolution supporting the City of Forest Lakes Retention of Zoning Authority Resolution Number 03-24-25-06.
I'll second.
We have a motion second. Any other initial discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your work on this, or, staff's work on this. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're gonna move into a discussion part of the meeting. These are strictly discussion items. No final decisions will be made this evening. First item is golf cart and ATV ordinances, and Captain Hanegraaff is gonna walk us through this.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. At the February 18th council workshop, a ordinance was presented to the council in regards to the ATV, UTV golf cart request by the citizens. And when we looked at how the best way to kind of formulate and rework this, one of the things is we needed to separate what an ATV and a UTV is, what a golf cart is, because they're two separate things. One's regulated by state statute, the other one is not. So what was presented to you in your packet was two separate ordinances. The ATV, UTV was requested to a repealing, replacing 71.06, and then also adding an additional ordinance for the golf carts themselves. I think it's gonna be very beneficial to separate these two ordinances specifically so it's easy for the public to understand, and it's easy for staffing to understand how these things are gonna operate, where they can operate, and what the limitations are for them. The registration of the golf carts will help the city as well as staff be able to understand that these golf carts have been looked at. We can easily identify that they've already been looked at by staffing, that they meet the requirements, that they can operate on these roadways. If we are out and about, or staff is out and about and they see one that doesn't clearly show that it's been registered, that's easy for us to enforce those ordinances at that point. So our recommendation is if there's any further modifications or guidance from the council regarding the two ordinances that have been brought up, we would look to forward for final approval at the next council meeting.
Any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, after reading through them, I thought they both looked right in alignment with our discussions, and I would have no recommendations for, relative to modifying it.
I agree.
Yep, correct.
Kevin, any concerns or?
Yep, nope,
questions?
I haven't seen anything different than what we talked about.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes.
one quick note. So because these were in draft form, legal hasn't done a really down and dirty review of them. So if council is good with the ordinances presented, the next steps would be to present them to Amanda so she can just give us an overview of them, make sure that we're in conformance and not opposing any state statutes. We'd post the proposed ordinances on our website and then bring them forward for final approval.
Well, so no motion then obviously tonight. I think we got a consensus that we're in agreeable with what changes here and separating them out. So thank you for your work on that. What do we then, let's say at the next meeting, these are approved, because the question is, when are people going to be legal? I know it might be two different things based on UTV, ATV versus a golf cart that needs to have that. So what does that look like?
So once council approves an ordinance, we have to submit it to the newspaper for publication before it becomes effective. Typically, if council approves an ordinance on Monday evening, I'm able to get that published in the paper the following Thursday. So realistically, our next council meeting is on April 14th. I think that would be April 17th would be that Thursday. So the ordinances would be in effect that day, and then folks could start their registration process. There's no registration required for the ATVs, UTVs. This ordinance is just going to provide some guidance for law enforcement and for residents as they're out and about on the streets. So that will be good to go effective the 17th if council approves as is on the 14th.
Great. Thank you. Next discussion item, planning intern code enforcement discussion. Abby?
Thank you, Mayor Roberts, members of the council. As some of you might know, the city historically has relied on interns to help with seasonal code enforcement efforts. The first couple of years I was here, wasn't quite there, but last year we did do that. And as much as our intern was great, it's just isn't the greatest system for code enforcement. Essentially what we're trying to do is bring in seasonal, lesser skilled staff, emerging professionals, giving them a great opportunity, but to administer kind of a complex program. And it's really kind of creating an imbalance, I would say, of bringing somebody in, training them up, and then they're leaving. The Community Development Department has $20,000 dedicated annually for an intern, and I wanted to chat with you tonight about your willingness to convert those dollars into a part-time, year-round position, 10 to 12 hours a week, but a dedicated code enforcement officer for them. Essentially what we're trying to do is bring in seasonal, lesser skilled staff, emerging professionals, giving them a great opportunity, but to administer kind of a complex program. And it's really kind of creating an imbalance, I would say, of bringing somebody in, training them up, and then they're leaving. The Community Development Department has $20,000 dedicated annually for an intern, and I wanted to chat with you tonight about your willingness to convert those dollars into a part-time, year-round position, 10 to 12 hours a week, but a dedicated code enforcement officer for the city. A single point source. Right now, code enforcement is predominantly administered by the city planner with support from the community development admin, but I'm also significantly involved. We have 3 staff trying to kind of run one program. And we're just seeing a rise in complaints. In the last 10 years, we've doubled the amount of complaints, but only added 20% more homes. And as we're going to continue to increase our homes and our population, I'm concerned that those complaints are just going to continue to increase. So I wanted to bring this tonight to you to discuss your thoughts on the matter of whether or not there's an interest, appetite to move forward with at least creating a job description, bringing something back before you. If not, that's fine. We'll head out in the intern world again. But I wanted to at least see what your thoughts were on this matter.
Council?
Couple of questions. That 10 to 12 hours a week, what's your sense that, what's that going to do for the department in terms of being able to handle part of the workload? I mean, how does that compare to the hours that are being dedicated currently from the 3 staff members?
Sure. So right now, there is probably 10 to 12 hours of work at least being done between the 3 of us, and we're not getting to it all. The 10 to 12 hours honestly would not be enough. It just would not be an increase in cost and being able to provide what I would say is generally the same level of service. It would free up my time and Ken's time to be able to focus on land use matters and things like code amendments and those necessary things that really get backburnered. Land use applications can't get backburnered, right? We have a statutory timeline, those really take precedence, and so then code enforcement gets backburnered. It's always just kind of that juggling act of where do we put, and unfortunately code enforcement end up kind of getting that back seat sometimes. Did that help answer your question?
No, it did.
Okay.
No, for sure. Follow-up question, you call out in the memo, our staff report here in our packet, that, it's kind of the 11th hour, we pulled that staff person for a variety of reasons.
Yep.
One of them was, hey, we just kind of put this new program in place. Let's see how it's going before we dedicate additional costs to it. So I guess my question is how do you feel like the program's going as it's currently designed?
I think that it is going as good as it can without dedicated staff. And I don't mean to say that because my conversation tonight is, hey, can we have dedicated staff? But there's gaps, right? We might get a request, but we can't really get out within maybe sometimes 72 hours, maybe a little bit longer. Dedicated staff, you've got them in, maybe they're in 2 days a week at 5 hours, 6 hours each day, or 3 days. I'm not sure how that could necessarily work. But there's a lot more consistency in the scheduling and the ability to just kind of stay on top of those. Right now, it's really relying on Dawn, the community development admin, to kind of help develop and keep us on top of systems. And if it's one of those weeks where we are looking at 3 concept plans and 2 plats and a potential land sale, it's going to wait till next week. And so we have in this last year developed a code enforcement system from start to finish. We were just finalizing with legal counsel all of the pending special assessments. So if we have to go out and ask somebody to pay a fee or clean up a property, we now have a system in place to recoup those fees. So we're finally in this year have a system in place. It would be great to have somebody to say, this is yours now. I do think that within the next 6 months, we want to maybe look at whether or not there might be some minor modifications to our ordinances, very minor, to just make sure that we've got everything in place. But I think that it's a well-constructed system that took us a little while to get those kinks worked out. The biggest kinks that exist right now are just our ability to stay on top of it in a timely fashion.
I didn't, crack a calculator out, so the $20,000 isn't a lot of money.
Nope.
Is that?
It is comparable to, I've looked at other code enforcement officer positions through other agencies. It is a comparable hourly rate. It would not be a benefited position.
Okay.
But so the idea would be maybe we can find a retiree, somebody that just wants to work part-time. Maybe we could still even find that college-age student that wants a part-time job. Those are some of the options that I think we might be able to find. And I might be looking for a needle in a haystack, but I thought this is a conversation I'd like to have to see if we can at least just start. If it turns out in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, we can't find somebody, then I think we kind of go back to maybe we, look at how else we can augment existing services, however else, so.
Just one final question. This internship program was obviously set up some time ago. it predates me. What are we losing by not having that intern? I mean, they haven't always been dedicated to code enforcement, have they?
No, they would also do some special projects of sorts, you know, if we've got an ordinance to work on or some special research. Not that I don't want to be able to be an organization that provides for those educational opportunities. I think that there's quite a bit of validity to doing that and assisting younger people in their career growth in that way. I think right now we're not well set up for it. Just frankly, as you guys just heard, you know, staffing, we've kind of been on that lower end. We're taking a lot of time to usually get them trained up, and then, you know, then they're gone. And that's internships. I think if we're going to provide an internship, though, I'd like to provide a much more meaningful experience where they're working on something that's a dedicated project. Maybe they do a little enforcement or some zoning code review or fence permitting or something, so they have a little bit of taste of things. But I'd like to be able to offer that in a better fashion than we're doing right now, than just doing enforcement efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or thoughts? I think it's a great idea. And it really, I suspect when we get to budget time here that we will be, this position, full-time position will be back on, on the discussion, and it's a good opportunity to stair step into that by having this part-time. I don't know if there are other cities that have a part-time person that we could reach out if maybe that person's interested in being full-time and splitting that. If we're having a hard time finding just someone that only wants to do X amount of hours, maybe they want more, but I think it's a great way to again, stair step into what we likely will be doing and quite honestly do need, I guess.
I mean, right now, as a reminder, we only do reactionary enforcement, right? We're not going out, but it's important. And the caseload of the ones I think I mentioned, we were able to close out 85% of our cases. A good mittful, maybe a little bit more, of last year's code enforcement cases are ones that have been lingering for years and probably will. And I think having that one person, and then also support from the planner, from me as they need, having that one person and point of contact can really help potentially move things along quicker than we can right now. So I see all heads nodding, and it sounds like most of you are in support with at least me moving forward with a job description and working with Mark on kind of that process for getting it back in front of you before we post it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes,
Awesome.
great,
Thank you very
great,
much.
Great idea on that. Right, so that, so we have, that ends our agenda items. We have staff updates. Jolene, we'll start with you.
No updates this evening.
Abby?
The only update I have is you should have seen an email from me that we set a joint work session Monday, April 7th with the EDA. I think I said time to be determined, 6:30? 6:30, thank you. I took a couple days off last week and my brain wasn't quite remembering right. So just as that reminder, agendas and packets will come out the week before. So let me know if there's anything you want to touch on at that meeting.
Dave?
Just one quick update. All the permits have came in for Lakeside Park. Contractor, depending on weather, will start next week. Figure 2 to 3 weeks to regrade and get the rocks reset, and then weather dependent on getting the sod and blacktop in. But at least the shoreline will start looking like it used to be fairly soon.
Great, thank you. Chief Peterson?
Yeah, Mayor and City Council members, I just want to thank you for approving the hiring of the 2 police officers tonight. We're really excited to get them on board. And also, I just want to give you an update. We did the initial interviews for the community service officer position, and we dwindled that down to 3 very strong candidates, and we'll be contacting them and going from there. Hopefully going to get that position hired in the very near future. And that's all I have for you.
Thanks. Chief Newman? You have anything?
Mayor, members of council, you have one update. Burn restrictions went into effect today. They'll typically run about a month or until green up is, so it's really rain dependent. Burning restrictions are set by the Minnesota DNR and followed by all municipalities. And if residents want to check to see if burn restrictions are in effect, then go to the Minnesota DNR website and look under burn restrictions. They're updated daily. Any questions?
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Ryan?
Mayor, City Council, no updates tonight?
Amanda? No updates. Mark, anything else tonight?
No, thanks.
All right, we'll start with this end. Kevin, any council update?
The only thing I would say is I got to go to my first school board meeting last week, and it was very informative, and I plan on getting to more, so I'll keep you up to date on that. And I also got a tour of our airport, in-depth tour a little bit, so I can be a little bit more educated when it comes to our discussions coming up.
Great, great. Hannah, anything?
Attended the Parks and Recreation Committee first meeting, and so, as mentioned, folks were sworn in, and they got an in-depth, just conversation from Kyle and Dave discussing their roles on the commission, so it was really good, positive, and optimistic. So I look forward to the next one.
Great. Jeff, anything?
Last Thursday, met for the first time with the fire board. Chief Newman just went over an overview of calls for service that we've had between Forest Lake and Columbus, and just a review of operations, which was very informative. Thank you, Chief.
Leif, anything?
No updates tonight?
I really don't have much, other than I attended both the Park Commission and the Fire Board, so thank you for that, Chief. And excited to have the Park Commission back up and running. And Dave and Kyle did a great job of walking them through and educating them on how a commission works, so thank you for that. With that, I wonder if anyone's interested in making a motion to go into closed session.
Yeah. I'll move to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiation strategy. The closed session will be held in the Forest Lake Conference Room and will commence immediately. Once the closed session is completed, the City Council will reconvene the open meeting portion in council chambers. Once back in session, the council will adjourn the regularly scheduled council meeting.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are in closed session. I will note, this is just a bit of a change. In the past, we have left the video feed running when we do go into closed session. We are not going to do that this evening. We strictly come back after closed session to come back and adjourn this meeting, so there's no other business in front of the council. So, thank you.